welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell. Today, Rose and I are continuing our conversation about who needs facts and figures in an age of climate change and coronavirus. And we are again joined by Graham Saunders, President of Environment North. Graham has been teaching for the Geography Department of Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, Ontario for over 20 years. His areas of interest and teaching include meteorology, climate change issues, particularly within Northwestern Ontario, northern development, and sustainable energy futures. Graham's experience includes weather forecasting at large and complex forest fires with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, and past employment at the Australian Weather Bureau and Environment Canada. He writes for various publications in Canada, the United States, and Australia, and we are so happy to have him with us again today because Graham is a numbers guy. He'll tell you he loves stats, and so we're going to talk about stats, we're going to talk about social media. Let's jump right in. Welcome here, Graham.
Great to be here.
Nice to have you, Graham. Our question is, who needs facts and figures? I just like to pick your brain a little bit more, Graham, about where what you see, where you see the numbers going. And you're in Thunder Bay.
Yes.
Right? Is that right? Okay. So what are you seeing up there in your area? Are you seeing people really locked down? I think it varies so much from area to area. And what's been your personal experience? I think I'm interested in your personal stories.
I'm going to talk about both subjects, the what's happening in this Thunder Bay and area about climate change and also the pandemic.
Thank you.
Interestingly enough, there's a study done by somebody at the university here, Lindsay Galway is her name, and she did a survey of what people in Thunder Bay think about climate change. And it's a very lengthy and scientific survey, like right numbers of to be significant and so on. And it was very interesting, and it showed a massive shift just in the last couple of years in what people in Thunder Bay think and are concerned about in climate change. So it was a shift in knowledge of people. So and the study explores a little bit about why that shift happened. But if that survey, if you took people at random, and they did, if you were in Thunder Bay and took people at random, you would find that the knowledge of climate change and concerns about it were fairly sophisticated. Not everybody, and there would be still people, a small percentage, like 10%, I think, in the study, who would say it's not man-made and all of this stuff, and they would say it's not a problem. But the vast majority of people in Thunder Bay accept that climate change is a major concern and will have negative effects if we don't do something about it. The pandemic is a little more mixed, and we don't have the latest information because we are not out that much. We don't go to a supermarket and drift by and see how close we can walk to people.
Fairly low.
Good for you.
Yeah, so it's fairly. And in Thunder Bay, the Thunder Bay Health Unit confirms that we've had, for a long time, we didn't have any cases. That may be
Nice.
true or maybe not. But to date, we have 76 confirmed. Most of them are resolved, 65. There's 10 active, and one person has died in the district, not actually in Thunder Bay.
And so just to remind people who've never been to Thunder Bay, how big is the population that we're talking about here?
Thunder Bay is about 120,000 people, but and this is a bit of absurd, the Thunder Bay Health Unit covers an area the size of France.
Oh my goodness.
It's
Wow.
massive. It's huge. And it goes from Lake Superior to Hudson Bay. So, but it's
You
huge.
can jump in, Kirsten, if you want. Kirsten is Graham's partner. I can see her passing him notes about the latest stats.
It goes to marathon.
Well done, Kirsten.
So I'm curious because you've had one death. How are your leaders? How is your government getting people there to actually stay inside or stay away? I mean, what I know of the human existence is that people are experiential. If they know someone who's been affected, which I personally know 4 people who have died in my sphere. I mean, a friend of my friend's grandmother, another's mother, that kind of thing. Not people that I know personally, but in my sphere. So I take it very seriously. But people who live in areas where the numbers are low so far, those are the states here in the US that are they're like Montana. Well, we've had X amount of deaths, 4 deaths. Well, the cause of closing our business is more detrimental than 4 people dying.
Yes, I've seen that statement. Yeah.
Yeah. So where you are, there's only one person that's succumbed to COVID, and yet I'm assuming you're in your house. I'm assuming that the community is doing a good job of social distancing.
Yeah, I think that's there would be exceptions, but I think that's the case. Do you agree? Yeah. So everything, well, not everything, but most things are shut down in this community.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot go to a dentist and optometrist and so on. So there's limited medical services at the moment. They are getting, because they're saying that the caseload in the hospital is somewhat manageable, so they're getting back into elective surgeries again. And it's, one hopes that if there's only 10 active cases and they're all either in isolation or in the hospital, that things are progressing fairly well. But there's still very limited reopening of most things.
So no nail salons or tattoo parlors. Safe to say.
No, not yet. No.
Being a little facetious here. Yeah.
No, I know, but that's the case. There are parallels, I don't know why this is. More than way over half of the cases and mortality in Canada happens in Quebec.
I know.
And
what is that about?
I don't, well, partly it's bad luck because it coincided with Easter break, and you had a flood of people who had been in high risk areas like the United States and other areas, and they came back, and then the virus went rampant through the population. And a lot of it is happening as other places too, in old age homes.
Mm-hmm.
So you get one case and it goes through that population. But even so, they're reopening.
In Quebec.
Yeah.
And in Ontario, we are not.
That's right. It's been extended again. And in British Columbia, it's getting ready to do a very careful reopening. But at least the information kind of supports that. I would be happier if places, jurisdictions in North America follow the New Zealand model, where they're down to every day or two, there's another case, and every week now there's another death. But you can say, hey, maybe that's a beginning point, and the recoveries, one of their standards was that the recoveries have to major overrule the number of new cases. You had to have a lot more people recovering in the numbers than you had new cases. And that's what they have there.
Mm. So again, they're looking at the data and making science-based decisions. Surprisingly, the government in Ontario seems to be doing that. I guess Graham and I would probably agree we perhaps have had to increase our opinion of our premier during this.
That's correct. Yeah, that was remarkable because he could have been easily, and well, it was me anyway, dubbed as mini Trump in his other policies before the pandemic.
Mm.
Yeah, but he's really relied on expert advice and followed it. So
that's right. Now, this is after, sometimes I think politicians act because of things that happen close to them. For example, one of the premiers, he had a son with asthma, and he was keen about shutting down the coal plants in Ontario because of the connection between respiratory illnesses and coal burning. So that was cool. He did that, and whatever his motives were, who cares? But
Ford, that was a few premiers ago.
Yeah, that's a few. Yeah. And the premier now, this happened after the fact. He had already done his diligence and declared that the province would remain shut for the foreseeable future. But his mother-in-law has COVID-19, and she's in a retirement home. So that's an interesting situation that came back for him. And I guess it worked well. It hasn't worked with Trump because apparently, reportedly, he has a number of friends who have died of COVID-19. And he doesn't get the message yet.
But no one in his family, no one in his family, lucky for them, not close enough for him to actually feel it.
Yes, it seems so. Yeah.
It might be the only thing that would make him feel it if he actually got it and died of it, and then he'd go, "Oh, maybe we should have done some more."
So maybe we need to be electing. Maybe one of the codicils for who we elect is people. How many vulnerable people do you have in your life?
Maybe, yes.
Sure.
To judge their potential action after election. Yeah, that's a thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I said that to be sarcastic, but it is, some of our leaders are so wrapped in this economic bubble that they're really not in touch with what's happening with the common person, the person that's, worried about their economic welfare or whatever.
This has been a great conversation. Any other pearls of wisdom? Now is your chance. Really.
So, Graham, you and your partner are there, and do you have children and grandchildren? And how does your picture enlarge? Where is your family and all that?
Well, I have 2 daughters and 2 sets of granddaughters, Winnipeg and Memphis, Tennessee. And my daughter in Memphis, we talk about what kind of precautions she takes because she delivers babies and operates on women. So I know that in her office, what kind of medical equipment she has on, and when she's actually in an operating room, she says that she's wearing the equivalent of a hazmat suit. So she doesn't get COVID-19 or lowers the possibility at least. So that's as close as we have been because she's obviously in a high-risk occupation. So that's the closest. We don't actually know anybody who has died of COVID-19.
So there's enough protective equipment in her hospital for her.
Yes, it seems so. Yeah. I fear that that's great, but I think it lowers the odds. As other procedures, the best thing at the moment has been, like they did in New Zealand. Oh, here's a little anecdote. The Prime Minister there said on the announcement of the stage 4 lockdown, where you sleep tonight is where you'll be in a month.
Wow. And I can see Americans going, hey, it's my freedom you're taking away. You can't do that.
That's right.
Can't take my gun, can't take my freedom. Sorry, Rose.
No,
Well,
we're not seeing the best of Americans right now. Let's just put it that way. I mean, there's lots of us that are taking it seriously. There's lots of people that no critical thinking skills. So yeah, it's a little disconcerting.
2 minutes.
Yeah, it is troubling, and I guess the cliche about it doesn't matter who you elect is being challenged in a couple of jurisdictions like the United States and Britain, because both Trump and Boris Johnson have been idiots about the coronas.
Although Boris named, you heard his girlfriend had a baby after he recovered from the COVID-19, and they named the baby after the 2 doctors who looked after him while he was in ICU with
Nice.
COVID. So maybe
nice.
he's...
Yeah, I think they were immigrant doctors too, but that's another little twist.
Yeah, nice.
Maybe he's learned his lesson.
Perhaps.
I'll need more evidence.
More stats for you.
That's right.
Fair enough. We'll have to do a double blind study. Him and Trump. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Graham, for your time, and thank you for giving us your input and for being a stats guy.
Well, thanks. We'll chat again, maybe.
Yes, that sounds good.
All right.
Good news for this week, and these 2 good news stories are kind of different ends of the spectrum. So corporately, Patagonia and Colombia have joined forces to combat the rollback of the 2015 Clean Power Plan. Wow. So for those of you that are paying attention, we're seeing a lot of our environmental edicts rolled back here in the States, but these 2 gear manufacturers joined forces.
Outdoor gear.
Yeah. And their brief asks the court to weigh the damaging impact that the rule change from the 2015 Clean Power Plan to replace it with a weaker, affordable clean energy rule.
We don't want to pay to keep our water clean and our air.
Right, right, and it really does roll back a lot of stuff for coal, clean coal. I say that facetiously, but anyway, their brief asks the court to weigh the impact that the rule change will have on the $887 billion outdoor industry. So, I mean, we're talking dollars to dollars. If they're saying, we want to make this more affordable, then what's the economic impact going to be? So, I think that's really smart.
Good on Patagonia and Colombia. That is good news.
Yeah. So 2 more companies to support with your dollars. One of your superpowers is the power of the purse, and that's where we need to stay. So I've got a long list of people that I'm supporting and people that I'm no longer supporting.
Different lists.
Yes. Different. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's this woman, a young woman. Her name is Sophia Kiani, and apologies if I'm saying that incorrectly. She's an 18-year-old senior in high school at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology in McLean, Virginia. And she has started, during this COVID lockdown, she has started a nonprofit called Climate Cardinals that translates climate and environmental information into different languages. So I thought that was she's an 18-year-old. She's an activist. She's been part of Fridays for the Future with Greta. And she speaks for Extinction Rebellion. But she's started this nonprofit because she has spent years translating articles about global warming from English to Farsi for her relatives in Iran, where news media hardly covers climate change. And so she's just decided to go bigger with it. And she's working on her website, and she's got 100 people that have volunteered to help with her. She's 18 years old. So, we're all thinking, like, what can we do? Can one person do? We all have something that we can do.
She looked around, and she was in lockdown, and she started this project. So thank you for those good news. And do we have an action tip and a sanity tip for today?
So we're going to roll it into one again. I don't know if that's because we're exhausted from the COVID as well as everybody else. So I've really been thinking about the need, and Christine and I have been talking about the need for extreme self-care. And I have a friend, her name is Catherine Ewing. Well, she's a Facebook friend. I've actually never met her, but we've had a lot of conversation over the years. She runs a website called Sacred Heart Alchemy. And she is offering, through COVID right now, she's offering her ebook, 125 Ways to Heal and Create the Life You Want. And it's lots of great self-care items in there that you could just pull out one a week for the days and the weeks ahead. And there's no cost. So I'll include the link for that on Earth Feels podcast. Yeah, you would love her. She's a tapping person too. So
I love the name of her website. And so
Sacred Heart Alchemy. So so
that's what a lovely gift. And like you said, it's both action. You have to go to the website and download the book, and then you have to read it and to preserve your sanity.
Yeah, it's a pretty quick read. I downloaded it myself a few days ago, and I was like, yeah. And it's broken up into mind, body, spirit, things you can do for your mind, things you can do for your body, things you can do for your spirit. So
nice. And are we going to have a little preview for our coming attractions, because we are going to be talking to Harriet Sugarman, aka Climate Mama, next week. And she's just come out with a new book. Do you remember the title of her book? It's about talking to kids about climate change.
How to talk to your kids about climate change.
Okay.
And I think it's a really interesting book. It's subtitled Turning Angst into Action. And Harriet's been doing a blog for a number of years.
Well, for like probably almost 10 years.
Yeah, she's been working in this area for a long time, but I think it behooves all of us, and it kind of fits in with what we said, the Best in Climate that I read a couple of weeks ago with Leah Sade and her daughter Rachel, where Rachel was actually asking schools for climate education. So it will be interesting to hear what Harriet has to say.
Yes. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye. Stay safe. That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me. You see, our mother, she has been